Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth day of the 51st Annual Yukon Geoscience Forum and Trade Show. Thank you for coming. Yay! Before we dive into today's program, I'd like to invite you all to the poster sessions taking place in the Longhouse and Core Shack classrooms A and B during today's breaks. Thank you to PDAC for sponsoring the poster session and Tetra Tech for sponsoring the Core Shack. Big thank you to sponsors for this morning's keynote is Snowline Gold Corp. Please join me in welcoming Scott Bradall, CEO and Director of Snowline Gold Corp, to the stage to announce our keynote panel moderator.
Thanks, Brianne. Yeah, it's good to see everybody here after day 16 of all day and all night events. So my name, as Brianne mentioned, is Scott Bradall. I'm the CEO and a director of Snowline Gold. It's my honor to be here this morning and my honor to be a sponsor of this panel on gender inclusivity in mining and exploration. I think it's a crucial conversation and it aligns very well with our values as a company. And I'll be the first to admit that as a company, we have more work to do in this regard, and as an industry, we do as well. But we've been the beneficiaries of the massive contributions that have been made by the culture that we're trying to instill in our company, and the contributions from the diversity of our team. Really, some of the key components that we've put into place today have come from that, and we hope to continue to grow. So I'm confident that today's panel will provide many more key insights, not just for us, but for the industry as a whole. And it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Mattia Alatini. It's a name here in the territory that's synonymous with action, integrity, and energy. And I mean, I've seen her at all kinds of conferences. When I was trying to start a tourism company, she was there doing all kinds of things. She spent 2 very productive terms as the chief of Kluane First Nation. She did a stint with the Yukon Government Cabinet Office and is currently chief strategist with GSD Strategies. So she'll bring her expertise to moderating the panel and hopefully helping to guide the discussion to productive insights for all of us here. So please join me in welcoming Mattia.
Gleo Shokwatan. Good morning, everybody. You ready for today? I'm like, last day of, I'm sure, a very fun reconnection. I didn't get to participate in a lot of the activities this week at other conferences. No, I'm just kidding. But really heard a lot of good things. I heard that Peter and Tosh did a really good job on a presentation or a panel yesterday, and that Peter was calling out the Kluane Mafia, which I'm like a proud member of. My name is Mattia Alatini, so Danjay Ing Mattia Uye, Kluane Man Kai J. I'm from Kluane First Nation, and very happy to be here to be moderating this really important panel. I have had the pleasure of working with these incredible women, and I think this topic is extremely important for us to be thinking about, and how we integrate the principles of ESG and diversity into all of our work, not just in the mining industry, but all of the supports that lead into the mining industry. And in every day, we need more matriarch energy to be doing things in a good way. And it's my honor to introduce Minister Jeannie McLean. Yes, come on up. Minister McLean is also the Deputy Premier of Yukon Government, and keeping Range in line, which is, I'm sure everybody knows, is a full-time job in itself. She was elected, and she's elected in 2016 as a representative of Mountain View, the Mountain View riding up by the McIntyre Village, and she's also previously served as the Minister of Tourism and Culture, the Minister responsible for the Women's Directorate and Workers' Compensation Health and Safety Board. Currently, she is the Minister of Education and the Minister responsible for Women and Gender Equity. She is the co-chair of the Yukon Advisory Committee on Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls and Two-Spirited Plus individuals, and has been instrumental in a Yukon-wide response to the final report of the National Inquiry into MMIWG. Thank you. Next, we have Laura Lee Johnstone. For you in the room, she needs no introduction. She's the president of the Yukon Chamber of Mines currently. When I looked at your LinkedIn, I'm like, oh my God, she's been on a lot of boards and committees and has a lot of experience. And I think it's that range and depth of experience in the industry that we're looking for you to share your experience on today. So she's currently with Hecla Mining as the Director of Indigenous Affairs and Canadian Community Relations. I have on there that you were on the Rockhaven Board of Directors. Are you still? Okay, Rockhaven. Minto Metals, JDS Silver, Silvertip, JDS Silver, and then Silvertip, and then Core Silvertip Permitting and Sustainability. All of the history of JDS mining. And Laura Lee is I look to her for a lot of her expertise and environmental work, permitting processes, just the inclusivity into the mining sector. So she's worked in diverse settings, including management, mining, and retail. Roles cover a broad range of environmental aspects, from soil, plant, strategic planning, and contamination analysis to water and wastewater treatment projects. Broad depth of experience. So please join me in welcoming Laura Lee. And the next panelist, I don't know what Naileen. Hi. I heard you had you hosted an evening last night. Come on up. Naileen Morin. It was good. Yay. Naileen Morin is the Vice President of Sustainability with Skeena Resources. The bio that I have for Naileen is a nationally recognized professional who has managed environmental reviews of several large resource development projects on behalf of Indigenous nations. I know we got 2 Taltans on the panel here. Yay. I'm told that you were previously working for the Tahltan nation government, and they scooped you over to Skeena Resources, and you're going to make changes there. Yes. Yes, she's an award winner. She holds a Bachelor of Applied Science degree from the University of British Columbia, a Mechanical Engineering Technology diploma from BCIT, and she currently resides in Smithers. Is that correct? Yes. Awesome. She's been recognized for her leadership as a recipient of the 2021 Skookum Jim Award and 2018 Indigenous Trailblazer Award and the 2018 Aura Award. She is also a board member of BC Hydro and Geoscience BC. So thank you, Naileen. So I just want to give like a textbook definition of ESG, and then we'll jump into the questions. The panel is entitled Environment, Social Governance, and Gender Inclusivity. So the pillars of ESG are environmental, social, and governance. It refers to a collection of corporate performance evaluation criteria that assess the robustness of a company's governance mechanisms and its ability to effectively manage its environmental and social impacts. So there's a whole bunch of activities under environmental, there's a whole bunch of activities under social and under governance. Some of those environmental is how are you using energy effectively and efficiently? What is your energy source as a company? What are some of your climate change strategies. Do you have a climate change strategy? There is, under social, it is how are you impacting the community that you work in? How are you supporting the community that you work in? And then under governance, there's the corporate governance. Are you looking at good risk management? Are you looking at developing in a, we call an Indigenous way, in a good way? So is that respectful? Are you being cognizant of your impact on the community and trying to leave it better than when you arrived? So given that context of ESG, I just want you guys, or you ladies, to describe the current level of gender inclusivity and social governance in mining in Yukon and Northern BC. And can you give an example of what is happening to support inclusion in Yukon and in the Northern BC context? And I think I'm going to throw it to Naylene first, and then maybe get Laura Lee and Minister McLean.
Good morning. I don't know why I'm going first. Sorry. There's a number of different things that, are taking place in mining in the province of BC, and apologies, I have not had the opportunity to spend much time working in the Yukon to date, so I'll be the BC contingent here. Specifically, like if I can provide some stats for Skeena Resources, I currently work for, of the 102 full-time employees that we have, 13% are Indigenous, 10% of that are Tahltan. Of the 10%, 40% are in management or on a professional track with the Skeena Resources company. Right? And today, and looking at some of the more recent stats, only 9.4% of Indigenous peoples in the mining industry. And, more specifically for women, we have 23% of our staff at site is women and 42% in the office. So we certainly are moving in a very positive direction. And one of the things that I definitely appreciate about, the opportunity to work for this organization and also work in the mining industry is to see the efforts that are being made today to change inclusion and diversity. We've seen some very positive changes over the years and an increase in the number of different people, more diverse backgrounds working in the industry. So I would start there for folks to build on.
And maybe if you could expand on that, just on, you gave some incredible stats. Is that part of a strategy that you guys have as a company, or is that as a result of the leadership of the company? How did you get there?
Well, if you are policies, our corporate commitments to move forward certainly illustrate, a willingness and the importance of moving towards inclusion and diversity. The stats I provide are simply, one of the ways in which we track the progress that's being made to date. And we report this in our annual ESG report as well.
And does your ESG report have targets?
Yes, it does.
And are you close? Or?
We're working towards them. Right, as everyone is. And it's certainly something you revisit on an annual basis to make sure that you're doing it right? And, within the organization, we've got a number of programs also that support that work, right? So we have leadership training opportunities for our folks that are on the professional track, right? We have a mentorship program in place, and we have a number of young Tahltans in engineering that are now part of the team that's building this project, right? So definitely some flagship things we're doing there.
Awesome, thank you. That's Thank you for sharing that. And Laura Lee, I'm going to turn it to you. If you could describe from the bird's eye view here in the Yukon and in your role at the Chamber of Mines, the current level of gender inclusivity and social governance in mining in the Yukon, and then some examples of what is happening to support inclusion.
Certainly, thank you very much. And Naylene brought on a lot of great points. I would say the Yukon is on a very similar track. I would say our industry is on a very similar track. I don't think I need to say much more than look at this panel and the amazing ladies that I'm blessed to be working side by side with. Naylene and I have worked together for quite some time through different projects. But I think, you know, as an industry, and I mean that across the board, like I'm a president of the Chamber of Mines, right? So the industry is embracing bringing women into the mix and inclusivity. You know, I would say that 10 years ago we were talking about local hire. I think local hire is still a priority, but we just keep adding to that priority mix as the need arises. I don't think many companies are fully where they want to be, and targets really, they're stretch goals. They need to be there. And I think we're now moving towards more of a true inclusivity rather than targets. I think in the future we will see less specific numbers and more action. To Naylene's point, I think that's the reason why we look at these things annually and we don't just measure ourselves against something that we may not be able to achieve. So from my perspective, the industry as a whole has truly embraced this, and we're starting to see a shift that's important. I think a lot of people will say, you know, we're not where we would like to be or need to be, but I also believe that there's a real importance in coaching people, starting people young, making sure they're successful. Because if we rush this, we're going to fail people in the process.
From your perspective with the industry, looking at the industry, are there some really good examples of who's doing ESG right?
Yes, there's some really good examples of who's doing ESG right.
You're going to call them out or lift them up.
There's also some real examples of people who are checking the boxes and may actually be getting high scores. So I think, you know, that's why we keep evolving this conversation, and every year we see new things that are either targets or problematic. And who do I think's doing it right? I think more than 50% of our industry, at least in Canada, in Western Canada, that I spend much time with, is really doing it right. I'll give an example because I have recently joined Hecla, and it's an American-based company, and their focus has always really been on community. They have third generation people working in many of their mine sites that have been long lasting. The chairman of the board is a woman, and you know, she's a very dynamic powerhouse. Had the blessing of meeting her. And they bring twice a year women in middle management to meet with like the chairman of the board and the CEO, and they have a 3 or 4 day session where it's usually a fun event. One of the events they do is go fishing, but they mix people around and they want them to have true conversations and dialogue about how the company's doing in this regard. So I'll use that as an example because it's something I'm in every day, but I really do believe, and we see this, if you look at the conference the last couple of years, the ESG content is so high and we're having real deep conversations in a public realm now, and I feel like we're headed in the right direction.
Thank you. You touched on something that I want to expand on, the companies that are doing it right versus checking a box. And how does the industry call that out?
Just like this. No, honestly, I think people are looking at the effort is there. People who are investing want this to be done right. They're not quite sure necessarily what right is. So, you know, they're trying to develop metrics that make sense. And the metrics just aren't there yet. So in one attempt to get it right, because companies do need to be out there in a very tough market raising money, if we push too hard with the list, then we get a checkbox exercise. Whereas if we have companies that are truly doing it, you'll see the integration across the high levels of management. It's there, it's coming. They commit to it in their statements, in their mission statements, and not just in the ESG report.
Thank you. Minister McLean, I'm going to turn it to you to just describe, as the minister responsible for women and gender equity, this context of not just in the mining industry, but in Yukon, as you look at what's happening here, can you describe the current level of gender inclusivity and ESG in Yukon and Northern BC, and maybe just some of the context around how Yukon government, through legislation or policies, is really supporting that?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Really great to be here and to be on a panel with such strong, amazing women. I've had this portfolio of, first it was the Women's Directorate, and in 2021 we changed it to Women and Gender Equity because of a move to really change the focus of that we wanted to look at the whole picture really in Yukon. So it's been a long journey, and I asked to keep the portfolio in 2021. I said, just keep me in the role, because we were on the path for some really significant changes. And one of them is the embracing, within government of Yukon, we've fully embraced gender inclusivity and diversity analysis. So that is a sectionality view of not just gender, but inclusivity, diversity in terms of many different aspects. And so we actually take a gender inclusivity and diversity analysis view when we are considering legislation, when we are considering policy, and we're working towards this, and you'll hear a little bit more about it as we move through the questions today on the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and 2S+ strategy, because we've really embedded it into new tools that we will be looking at including in our assessments. So we're looking to have this embedded in YESA. And, in terms of changing the culture, I think that's really, a big part of the work that I've been involved in, and it really is a team approach, and you have to really work in a way of change management that it's not just a nice idea, it's really a good business decision to have, to work towards equity, to work towards diversity within your companies. Right now in Canada, Natural Resource Canada has reported that women make up less than 15% of the Canadian mining workforce, compared to 48% of the overall Canadian workforce. That's a really important statistic, I think, for us to unpack and really look at. So again, it's not just a nice idea, it brings real change to your organization. And I talked a little bit about this yesterday, and we've really, within Government of Yukon, we've embraced it, and we're really working towards embedding it in how we do our work. So on Gita, and I'll talk more about that, but yesterday I left a little teaser about our panel today, because I wanted folks to show up, and it's really great to see all of the different companies and different sectors, I think, in the room, and that I'm not speaking to only a room of women, because we need everyone needs to be embracing what we're talking about here, because it is a move throughout Canada and throughout the world. So according to a recent study, companies focused on gender equity, diversity, and inclusivity are in fact, 21% more likely to have greater long-term value and above average profitability. They're more innovative, they make better decisions, and are generally more successful. So it's not just a feel-good thing. It's a smart business move. And I'm proud to say that our government is really committed to work to, stepping up and changing that culture. So, yeah, so I think that the work that we've done over the last several years, for me, it's been 7 years of work to work towards changing the tools, changing and embedding it in how we do our business and how we do our work is, going to have a long-term shift. And I always look at how do I future-proof the work that I'm doing so that when I'm no longer in the role, it is just the way we do our work.
I think that's really important. You talk about the metrics, the frameworks, the strategies to get there. The GITA lens is such an important, so the gender inclusivity, diversity assessment that governments use is such an important tool for really changing how we look at creating legislation and policy. Do you guys, so both Laura Lee or Naileen, do you see that type of analysis happening in companies, or is it embedded into the ESG? And I'll just throw it out to either of you.
So I think for us, it's inherently built into our ESG, but we certainly have requirements to do specific studies as part of our environmental assessment process as well, right? So I think both certainly are key, and commitment from a company to do the work is also important.
Okay, I was just thinking, go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, just also have a background in doing environmental assessment now from both sides of this table. I think in unpacking, Jeannie, I think that's a really critical conversation to have, because what I think we've seen across the mining industry is if you put mining as just specifically that company doing that activity, we will likely struggle for a very long time to get equity in numbers, and part of that is the lifestyle that's required to work in a camp or a remote camp. But that being said, I think we're much closer than we think on those stats if we take that to the secondary activities that mining supports. So it'd be interesting to unpack that in a way that is truly reflective of what we're able to accomplish, rather than focusing on balancing. And maybe we do balance. I don't know the answer to this one, but I have seen over the time the efforts of the different companies that I've worked with. One of the challenges is just that very thing. And it's not just with women. It's, it's a very specific person who loves and wants to be in a remote camp situation. So I don't know what the answer is, but I just think in my experience in trying to make this a success, I think we'd be very careful in how we unpack it and set it up to succeed. I love that it's being contemplated through the legislation, and as long as the messaging is the right kind of thing that supports people in the right kind of way, I'm 100% behind it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I think we've kind of touched on this question around the benefits of inclusivity, the benefits of really having that ESG strategy or that diversity lens, looking at it through that GITA lens. What are some of the other benefits that you'd like to highlight around having GITA or ESG strategies in the workplace? I know you guys have touched on a lot, but just additional.
Well, I think that, again, I touched on it a bit, just in terms of what, I mean, we've done an incredible amount of work, and just, again, I agree with you, Laura Lee. We have to make sure we're bringing people along on this journey, that it's not a, change management is really important when you're considering this and not, you know, I know that what the industry has been and what society has really has changed a lot in terms of even the 2S LGBTQIA. That's something we haven't said today, but you know, we've also created a strategy around that and to change the culture in the Yukon to understand and work with those members of our community, and so it's I guess I mean, I'm not directly involved in ESGs, like I'm not, but when you work towards bringing new strategies in, it really changes the whole culture of government. Even just being an Indigenous woman in cabinet changes government because I have a different lens. Yeah, and I bring it every day, you know. And so even within our deputy ministers, we have gender parity right now. That's new. We've never, I don't, all the time that I've been in government for 7 years now, we've now achieved gender parity at the deputy minister level, and that changes how decisions are made and the considerations. So having the different lenses, I think, they're incredibly important. I know that we'll probably get into this a little bit more, Mathia, but you know, when we are applying GITA, and some companies have already done that, and YESA has the Yukon Environmental and Socioeconomic Assessment Board has been proposing different conditions, and they've done some of this view on different projects. So one of the case of Coffee Gold's decision document, the conditions are laid out in there that are done through a GITA lens, and so that's new as well. And I won't go through each one of them, but I'll maybe touch on a couple of them to develop. One of them is to develop a personal safety monitoring program with the Government of Yukon, the Status of Women Council, and a Yukon Aboriginal Women's Council, develop mandatory regular harassment prevention training to be delivered by a qualified expert to all employees, contractors, and consultants working on the project. There's a couple of examples. There are several others that were conditions that were stated for the operation to include in their operation. The other thing, I guess from my previous roles, Mathia, I was previously the Minister of the Yukon Workers Compensation, Health and Safety Board. It's now changed to the Yukon Workers Safety and Compensation because we rewrote the Act. But part of the rewrite was to include, previously we included the prevention of psychological injury in workplaces, and really the focus was on, because I brought that law in, the prevention of bullying and harassment on the job site. So it's now the law in the Yukon. So that's something that we brought in as well. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different tools that you can bring in, and supporting companies to get there, I think, is a big part of it.
Thank you. I think that's really important to state that it is law, anti-bullying. How are you going to be inclusive of LGBTQ2IA+, A, B, C, D, E? Like, everyone's always like, oh my God, what does that all stand for? I always have to think about what it all means. But it is really being inclusive. And I know you guys had talked about the benefits of bottom line, the increase in long-term value, the increase in profitability. Naylene, I want to kind of shift to your company and the reporting that you guys do on ESG. You said that you have an ESG strategy. How closely do you work with the First Nation on identifying those commitments and building those commitments or that relationship into your ESG reporting?
So thank you for the question. Since making a switch previously, I worked for the Tahltan Nation and the Tahltan Lands Department, and I am a Tahltan. I always struggle a little bit with that question when people ask me that. We certainly work quite closely, both internally, right, and with the central government and others on the development and tracking of our ESG. So if I can, just looking at business and procurement, we track the stats of all Tahltan companies that are currently working for Skeena Resources, right? And, under the social aspect of things as well, of course, we have our mentorship program, which, has been in place now for a number of years, going through evolution, but will continue to grow and prosper, right? Our social and environment policy for the site, for the company, was actually done in collaboration with the Tahltan central government. And when you look at the policy, you'll see that, some of the principles found in Tahltan laws and governance pieces is also echoed in the work that we've done in our policy as well, right? I'll just, one more. Under the recent, in 2022, the first consent agreement was signed for the project. And part of that consent agreement's work, is the central government running through what is their now new environmental assessment strategy. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a bit later today, but I do want to say, in going through this process with Tahltan, there certainly is a commitment to the sustainability principles and other tools that have been developed that we will continue to apply through the development of the project, the environmental assessment application, and into project construction and operation, right?
I think that's a really important piece to highlight again, is the fact that the work is done in collaboration with the nation, and speaking to the success that you have with the number of women in leadership, women in C-suite management type roles, and how that changes the dynamic. So I'd almost highlight that as, a best practice. Like, how can you really do this work if you're not doing it in collaboration? So really kudos, thank you for sharing that. Laura Lee, I'm gonna ask you about the, around the tracking of ESG, that best practice that we're seeing. Are there any other examples or ideas, benefits, impacts that you see in the industry as outcomes of this type of collaboration?
100%. So thank you, Nailene, for rolling all that out for us. I think people have to realize that there's been almost 3 decades now of work. Tahltan growing their governance, working with the industry. They're at a place now where it is really, it's very front and center, and it is very advanced. So I think before I go into that, I think it's really important to realize that Skeena is an amazing place. They're doing a really good job, and I will highlight them, even though I wasn't going to intentionally do that on this panel. But no, honestly, they have great people. They've gone through a lot. They have the benefit or disadvantage, whatever you want to call it, but they have been working through the right time frame as the Tahltan are also building their momentum, doing more, better understanding. Other companies will have a struggle just because the nation's new to the industry and everybody's trying to figure things out. Everybody knows they have to consult and engage. The how it gets a little tricky if we're being honest, right? Like a lot of nations don't have guidance. They haven't really had the opportunity to think through how they want to do this. They don't have the experience. So in a lot of cases, you're working with a nation that's new to this concept. It looks entirely different. You won't get there that quickly. But I think what is critical is the openness to engage, the willingness, and truly engage. I mean, Nalene talks about the policies. I think if the nation's ready to have those conversations, you should be building all of your policies with them. The other piece of that is don't just expect that you can go in and do that, because every nation that I'm working with currently is under-resourced. And I think, you just have to find that balance. And that's where I think the difficulty is in finding these tangible things that you can put into an ESG report, because everybody's at a different place. So I think it's really about best understanding the community and nation you're working with, or nations, and that makes for even greater conversation. But I think it's really about being truly committed to trying to find the things, and sustainability is really about finding the balance of being able to change. And that's one of the things that permits and environmental assessments don't really give you, that ability to work on the fly. Like, things are changing so quickly right now, that if you have an assessment from 5 years ago, it will nowhere near meet the intent of today in this realm. So I think we need to find ways to stay flexible in how, Jeannie's talking about terms and conditions. I think those terms and conditions have to be written in a way that they can be flexible and grow as we move through a really quickly evolving time.
I think that some words that came to mind as you were describing that is really around iterative adaptation, or just building that flexibility, and working with the community and where it's at. I just want to pull out those little nuggets there. One of the things that you guys had mentioned previously was around coaching or mentorship in the organization. Is there good examples of those types of programs, initiatives that you've seen in the industry? And is there kind of a best practice that other people who are new to the industry or new to the Yukon can emulate or look to build that up? Go ahead, Nalene.
I'll just take a moment and talk a little bit about the mentorship program that we have with SKENA. I mean, I've certainly, as someone with an engineering background, are very familiar with various engineering training programs across the country. But I do want to say, like, one of the things that's quite unique about the program that we've got at SKENA, and it was under the previous leadership, Justin Himmelwright actually went out and, personally made the effort to reach out and acquire a number of young professional Taltans, in various stages of engineering in their career, and brought them into SKENA, right? So at one point we had 3, and 2 of them are still, with us today, and are getting, the experience working directly with the engineering teams, but they're also getting local experience as well, right? So when they developed the program, it was really important, that the Taltan, the young people, the Taltans, were able to go home and participate in cultural activities at home, and also have good mentorship opportunities, both professional mentorship, but as well as Taltan, right? So they're getting, what I would say is the best of both worlds, and for me, when I came into the industry, having a very strong cultural background, and also the professional engineering background, those 2 pieces together make me who I am today, right? And that's why we wanted to make sure that our young mentees had a similar sort of experience. So if you're looking at setting up programs, it's really key that there's the opportunity to have a blending of both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because I'm like, that's such an Indigenous way to do things. I see you. I see your talent. You're going to work in the community. I'm like, you're voluntold. um, Kudos for the Tahltan Nation for really developing and curating that type of talent. Because I think you do need that kind of blending of the professional experience, and it's not just mentorship, it's really a capacity development piece, because you want people who are really strong in their identity to be influencing the workforce. And really, like, kudos, that is such a big piece in changing the dynamics in an industry. So did either of you, Laura Lee or Jeannie, want to address that?
Yeah, I was just reflecting with Naylene. I said it's such a matriarch way of doing things, right? Like that's exactly how. I mean, I've been mentored my whole life. Like I've always had strong mentors that have just taken me under their wing and, could see something that I couldn't see, and that is why I'm here in the position I'm in today, because of those mentors. And so I really believe in that approach, and to bring young people along and to help them see what their potential is. And every company that is wanting to do work within traditional territories of nations can be a big part of that. So I think that's a great example, Naylene. I just wanted to reflect that because it makes me feel excited. And now I'm a mentor to others. I've become that mentor as well. So
You're just excited because it's Tahltan Nation.
So I'll just, okay. I also am excited because it's Tahltan Nation, and I have been lucky enough to be mentored by many Tahltan in my role. Working in their traditional territory, they're very engaged. I think I'd like to just take that one more step. Not just the nation whose area you're working in, but the community, the greater community, we're doing some really great things. We're moving in some really great directions. I just don't want to leave anybody behind in this. So I will say that you're going to influence or impact a community, a number of communities, a territory, a whole nation, and let's make sure to apply all those lenses while we're bringing everybody into our space. We tend, as human beings, to get laser focused on the thing we're trying to improve, and sometimes there's unintended consequences. So I'm really excited to have been part of, the growth of this, and see how much more quickly we're adapting as humans as we move forward from women entering the workforce, nations. Now we have both. Now we're just looking for greater and greater inclusivity as we roll through this, and it's getting easier because we've done it. So I want to apply that piece, because as we dig into getting into detail, we sometimes miss some of the greater things that we still continue to do. So these are important. They should be front and center. But let's keep the big picture, because we tend to go after fixing something.
You want to add? Yeah, go ahead.
I want to add another bit to that, and actually challenge all the folks here working in industry. I haven't had an opportunity since I left the central government, but one of the things that we did while we were there with the Red Chris Project's Tailings Review Board is to include a spot for Tahltan, a mentorship spot for Tahltan. And it was really, really important to us that, number one, of course, we certainly recognize and respect the level of expertise that exists on these boards. But we have a number of young people that are up and coming that we would like to be able to get to that place, right? So the company at that point was very willing to have a seat to allow a Tahltan participant to interact with the board, to present information to the board, so that Tahltan knowledge, those values, were included in the consideration and the decision-making of that particular technical board. And I'm not there at the moment, so I don't know if that work was continued, but I certainly hope it was. But I think it's a missed opportunity, knowing we only have a certain number of experts that are available for these tailings review boards. If we can start to think about how we can create and grow new ones, maybe that's an opportunity that we should be looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's an extremely important, as the industry ages, as there's attrition, it's really important to be thinking of how are you curating the next generation. I want to touch on that point that you made, Laura Lee, that it's not just about the community, but the mining industry is global. It is a global industry. The money comes from international, the companies are international, and we really have to be thinking about how are we being inclusive to the global community. I mean, as a First Nation person, the work gets done in our backyards, but how are we looking at this as an industry that has the potential to change the dynamics in the world? Minister McLean, as we're kind of closing out our comments here, I really want to highlight the work that Yukon has done in leading the way around the national inquiry into murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, and Two-Spirited Plus. We, as Yukon, were the location that kicked off the national inquiry. And can you describe the MMIWG 2S Plus strategy and the implementation plan that has come out of that, and how it relates to ESG? And is there a call to action for the mining industry?
Thank you so much for the question. Again, this has been 7 years of work for me, but I was on the technical side of it for a long time. And so coming into government, we came in right at the time when the inquiry was happening. The inquiry started here. We invited them to come here. That's why they started here. Everyone thinks it's some kind of big thing. It's like, no, I just invited them and they came. And so we kicked off here, went and reimagined all the way through our advisory committee to be responsive to what was happening with the inquiry. And I know that the question people have in their mind right now is like, why does this apply to us? And I'll get there. But so working with the commissioners and helping to support the inquiry to happen, and then finally being in receipt of that report, Yukon took it, adapted and looked at what was important to Yukon, and we were the first in Canada and still the only in Canada to have a whole of regional approach to the National Inquiry's final report. So we have, it includes 31 actions under 4 pathways, and recently, over the last couple of years, we worked towards developing a full implementation plan. And when we actually launched that strategy, we had 52 signatories. That when I talk about it being a whole of Yukon approach, it's a whole of Yukon approach. So every level of government, from federal, territorial, all cabinet ministers, every First Nation chief and council and municipality signed on, and as well as many very key contributors and partners like the RCMP and others. So we had 52 signatories. Since then, we've had 2 accountability forums, and which is an annual check-in on this. And so the implementation plan was recently released. There are so many pathways in here for industry, for private sector, because it is about responding to some of the tragedies that have happened around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, but it's also a pathway out of it to prevent. And so there are a lot of tools in here for industry to look at. We've focused on resource extraction and major infrastructure projects, as I've talked about today, around building that into our assessments and impacts on communities. So there's a section there, but there's also one of the other priority areas is the community safety and assessments and planning. And why I mention this is because what we actually have in our communities is an economic gap. We have, incredible resource-rich lands and possibilities, and you're all here to explore that. But when we look deeper into our communities, because really that's my background that I come from and worked in that area for a really long time, is we have a segment of our community that's just left out of it. They're not participating, they're not benefiting directly, and we have an opportunity to close that gap. And I think that needs to be part of the focus when we are assessing and looking at working with nations. And when, as Laura Lee talked about nation to nation, there's a lot in here that can help, and we've thought it through. There's 180 milestones in this implementation plan. The challenge and the call is that we now have private sector, we have other partners and contributors and stakeholders that are signing in. So when we did the declaration, everyone signed a declaration to implement. What we're calling on now are allies and folks that can really contribute to breathing life into this, and you're part of that. So I would invite industry, companies to look at this and to consider signing a declaration to work towards implementing our strategy. There's a part in here for you. We were very careful about ensuring that everyone could see themselves in this and that you would have a role. And what is going to prevent these tragedies from happening in our communities will be strengthening, safety and well-being and closing the economic gap for all Yukoners. Not just Indigenous women, but all Yukoners and those from diverse communities. So that's my challenge. It's been thank you for setting me up so well, Mathia.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
And do you want to
thanks.
show the cover of that?
Yeah, it's
and
beautiful.
I'm sure we can have copies of the implementation
Yeah,
plan
absolutely.
available.
Yeah, it's and it's a work in progress. And so, as I mentioned, every year we have a full reporting out to each other and to families and to the folks that are impacted. But it's also we have an accountability forum, and I'd love to see the mining industry and major infrastructure companies come to say, hey, you know what, we signed on, and this is a project that we've done to really implement this strategy because it's going to create better communities. And I think that's what everyone came together with, that kind of background to say, like, how do we, because this is not just my work, this is a matriarch document, in my view, that everyone looked at. How do we really change the systemic issues, including the substance emergency, including all of those other issues that we still see in our communities. And when we have wealth, we have even more of those. That's my brother. I'll just be clear.
That was your buzzer?
No, that's my brother. Phone, I know that phone ring. So on that note, I'll stop, maybe.
Okay, we're at the end of our time, and I just want to throw out the last question around what's the vision if you think 5 years down the road, what's the vision for ESG and really that inclusivity in community? Laurelie?
I have to jump on this because I can't go there until I'm just sitting here chomping at the bit with all these things that Jeannie's saying. So I think as an industry that is seeking out things that are hard to achieve, this is an easy challenge. We've been looking for the right mechanisms to do. We've been mining your communities for a very long time. And I think, we need to be in at every level, but I've always been excited about starting at entry into school level. Not talking about mining, but learning about kids and where their strengths are. And we've talked about all of these things. And since I've been doing this now for a couple of decades, I'm excited to say that these things are all things good companies are working on. We want communities to be successful. There's always been that sensitivity around where is it not your business to be stepping in? But having everybody come together with the same vision, all with different lenses, which is really important, and identifying for each community where those gaps are and how we can be of support, it's an advantage to us. You're helping us. I don't see that as a challenge. I see that as let's do some more things together. So from my perspective, and I'll speak on behalf of my company, done.
Yay! We're going to have copies of the declaration available for signing.
And so to be respectful to Mithia and her question, I think as we roll through things, we just be very careful in what we set up as our targets to make them support the initiative, not look for a checkbox. And it will be hard because it's easy to say you have to achieve 13% reduction in something. With humans, a percentage is always a tricky thing. And working in First Nation agreements, if you have one mine in a large territory, you set a really high objective of employees. Now we are at the point where in some communities, First Nation governments are saying, please stop doing that. Like, we need to hire our own people and we're running out of people. So I just encourage us to be very creative in how we set up the ESG side of things. And remember, we're now talking about humans, not metrics.
Thank you. It's so important. Nailene, last words.
So, it's awesome when they give a Tahltan woman the last word of the day. Just saying. Anyway, there's a couple of things I would add to that. Let's not be afraid to change our decision makers, right? It's not very often that I actually will sit and say nice things about myself because that's just who I am. But it's a pretty big deal for Skeena to have taken the chance on me, right? Tahltan woman in a leadership role, right? So here we are now. We have Tahltan part of the decision making in the corporate sense, but on the environment side, it's changing your policies so that you're inclusive and you're considerate of, Indigenous laws, stewardship laws. At the end of the day, by doing that, by making that commitment at that level, inherently we're changing the way we're building this project, right? So I agree, ESG is going to be adaptable. I get it. We need targets because we like those things. Yeah. But, right? But I think it's going to evolve. And I'm looking forward to the journey.
Yay! Yeah. Thank you. Can you please join me in welcoming and thanking these wonderful ladies? And that's it. You guys have shared so much information. Thank you so much. Lay down the challenge.